Meet Nico. He just wrapped up a 12-hour day consulting with overwhelmed pharmacies, fixing outdated systems, managing vendor contracts, and coaching exhausted store managers. On the outside, everything looks fine. Polite, he's calm, he's relaxed. But inside, he's burning up. Earlier that day, a coworker said to Nico, well, Donald does it differently. And something in Nico snapped. He didn't say much, but the anger boiled up within him, and the thoughts keep looping ever since that conversation. Nico knows that Donald is more extroverted, more charismatic, more liked. He's been compared to him before, but it was different this time. He can't seem to let it go. Most nights, Nico gets home, sits on the couch, looks at his phone, puts the TV on, and just eats junk food. His gym membership hasn't been used in months. A guitar he bought over a year ago is collecting dust, and the anxious voice in his head keeps getting louder. Nico used to feel a spark within him. He used to feel that his work was purposeful. But lately, he seems to just be seeking validation. And if he doesn't get that praise, then his self-worth plummets. And he knows that he has people he can reach out to. His family cares about him, but how would he even start a conversation? What would that even sound like? Today, I'm joined by Allan Kehler, global keynote speaker and best-selling author who spent over 10 years helping people to speak their truth, to shed their mask, and reclaim their inner voice. Allan's story is one of resilience through mental health and addiction. And today, he helps employees and workplaces create environments where people feel seen, heard, and supported. His TEDx talk on men's mental health received international recognition, and his message is powerful. Your story has power, and you are not alone. And I look forward to hearing how Allan would help someone like Nico, someone who is quietly unraveling behind a polished exterior, just waiting for permission to speak up. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So, Allan, you speak and write about mental health. And what I've learned about you is that you had your own journey and your own mental health challenges. So you are often speaking and writing about it from experience. And I was curious if I could learn what that story is, what your own personal journey was through mental health and the work you had to do on yourself.
Yeah. And Jay, I think that the most powerful thing that exists in this world is our story. And I appreciate the opportunity. For me, I grew up small town. It was kind of like a fishbowl. And I think that sometimes we forget that just because someone is smiling, that doesn't mean that they're happy. And I became a very good actor at an early age because when I look back, grade 8 is hands down where my challenges with mental illness began. Body dysmorphia, the depression, the anxiety. I didn't know what to do with that stuff. We didn't talk about it. And so I stuffed it all in. And on the outside, people see the guy who's president of the school, athlete of the year, captain of sports teams. Fast forward, I received a national scholarship as an outstanding community citizen, but I was an addict. And nobody knew. And I lived this life of secrecy for so long. And I was always trying to figure out, like, why do I hate myself so much? I loved smoking at an early age because I felt like I was killing something inside. I loved drinking early on because I felt like I was able to drown the demons. But as we know, eventually the demons learn how to swim. And the short and sweet is, oh, I spend so much of my life trying to harm or kill myself. Um, and there's just no logical reason, Jay, why I should still be alive after the life that I've led, other than I have bought into this idea that I've been spared, so to speak, by creator, God, whatever word you use to carry a message. And this entire journey is so much bigger than myself.
Mm. Well, you are sharing that message on stages all over the world in the work that you do and the writing that you do, and I know it's resonating with people who need to hear it. And Alan, when you think through then what you experience, grade 8, a young man, when you try to point to like, okay, this was the real cause of it. Now that I'm looking back, what do you feel was the real cause of some of those challenges that you were dealing with back then?
Oh, so early in my sobriety, I had support. I had love. I was in a position of strength, and I think my body understood that it was safe to release some trauma. And that, Jay, is where I understood where so much of this pain was coming from, because I started to get flashbacks of being sexually abused throughout my entire childhood by people that were supposed to take care of me.
Mm.
And to be honest, I had a very hard time staying alive. Uh, because as a man, we don't talk about that. Like, where do you go with that stuff?
Yeah.
And actually, it was a support group, a local support group for other men who've been sexually abused, that was just another thing that saved my life. Um, and it helped me to understand a lot of the why I was trying to always destroy myself. But it took my healing journey to an entirely different level. And I mean, it doesn't end. I still struggle immensely with, trauma and different thoughts. But the difference is that I have embraced the fact that vulnerability is a strength. And I've truly embraced that idea that we actually weren't supposed to fight our
Mm.
battles by ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that, Alan, and it's a tough thing to have to learn. I can relate to the upbringing of suppressing emotions, and
Mm,
as a man, you're not supposed to talk about these things. I would remember seeing my father at a young age sitting on his chair, and I knew something was bothering him, but he would never talk about it. And
mhm.
he's traditional Middle Eastern man. That's how he was raised. And so it took
Mm,
me a lot to figure out, wait, it's okay to talk about this. It's okay to be vulnerable. So Alan, I guess I would hope that 2025 we've gotten past that, but we haven't, have we? And I'm curious what your thoughts are as to what it's going to take to be able to allow for, especially men in this case, be more open to expressing what they're going through.
about, I think probably 4 years ago, one of the books that I wrote was on men and mental health. And what I took away from that project was that vulnerability breeds vulnerability, and nothing has the power to shatter stigma like someone's story. And the more that people are able to put a face and voice to it, the more we're able to connect to others and realize that we're not alone. Because I don't know about you, Jay, but I spent so much of my life thinking that there's no way that anyone else has these thoughts. And it is incredibly liberating when you can find out that, you too, like, I would say the two most powerful words, and I think it's Brene Brown actually who says that, it's me too. Because just like that, there's connection.
Yeah. And so you would then suggest that the power in this, or maybe let me rephrase that. the ability for more people to be vulnerable starts with someone being proactive in expressing it themselves, having, I guess, the courage to do so.
Always. Yeah. You know, even in places of work, it often just takes one person to be courageous enough to share their story. And you can just see that ripple effect. And, for me, I lost everything to gambling. I was a compulsive gambler, I was an alcoholic. And uh, I think that you like those rooms are so powerful. That's where you realize that you're not alone, and you start to understand the importance of recovering out loud. Because I get that confidentiality has its place, especially in the workplace. But if we all stayed quiet about it, then what? And I really hope that one day we can get to this place where we can just speak openly and honestly and applaud the courage that it takes to speak about some of our emotional pain.
Yeah. Well, I think that the sense of safety that you referred to earlier is coming to mind in organizational or psychological safety within these groups. Because I mean, I hear it all the time, and I'm sure you hear it too, Allan, which is, well, I just don't feel safe to talk about it. I don't, I feel that if I bring up the challenge, someone is going to come to me and say, oh, well, just toughen up, or just come in a little earlier, or, don't complain, keep your head down, do the work. And it's not met with compassion. So what do we do about that?
Yeah, and I think that that's reality to this day, Jay. 100%.
Yeah.
I really enjoy speaking to some of those industries that are still kind of dominated by men. The trades, the construction, the mining. But again, this is often the top down, the leadership, and I love working with leaders who are willing to just share a little bit about their story, paving the way for others. And sometimes I think we overthink this. It's not like we have to just share all of our secrets, but it's as simple as when someone says, "Hey, how are you doing today?" To even say, "Today's a tough day." Uh, and sometimes it's that simple phrase that can help open a door for further conversations, or if they can see that someone can be a little transparent without any repercussion, safety can move forward.
I'm really glad that you said that, because it could sound for the listener that it needs to be this big reveal in order to be
Mm,
vulnerable. And it's like this
mm.
big leap you need to take, but it doesn't need to. Just, I gathered that from your answer, which is it could be something small, just a little bit of what you're going through. You and I, when we hopped on this first call at the very beginning, you asked me how I was doing. And I was going to at first just say, I'm doing fine. But then I told you the truth about what I was going through, right? I said, last night I stayed up a little later than I normally do because it was my friend's birthday, and it kind of threw off my Thursday. I didn't wake up as early as I would have liked. And that was me being just a little bit more vulnerable than I normally would. And it's just a great way to just connect and be real and to be honest about what we're going through. So, I guess in summary, it doesn't need to be this big, vulnerable, I'm spilling my guts out to the world. You can start small with just an honest inventory of what you're working through when you're speaking to someone at work.
Yeah. Well, Jay, I love that about you because you said, if I can be honest, and then you went into how you were really doing. And maybe for me, it's because I spent over half of my life feeling like a fraud, like a hypocrite, so fake, hiding behind that mask that I can't do it anymore. I don't want the fake conversations. I want authentic. I want real. And it's interesting because, you know, like you, the work that we do in people's places of work, that's actually the one thing that they want more than anything: authenticity. And people can see when and feel when things aren't authentic anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not, you think that you're putting on a good show. Right? But people can sense it. The the mask that we wear is something we recognize at a subconscious level a lot of the time. And it's why
Mm.
I think that people don't, let's say, feel so inspired to work under a certain leader, when it's not that that leader is doing something so overtly harsh. It's because that person isn't just being genuine and being authentic and being real. And because of that, they don't even have a logical explanation why, but they're not so bought in, or they're just not feeling really safe. They're not feeling connected in the workplace.
Agreed. Connection. That is the word also that repeatedly comes up. And you alluded to this earlier, Jay, but I do find it fascinating that we live in this world where we're more connected than we've ever been. And yet I would also argue that we are more disconnected.
It's so true. I mean, when you have a way in which you can live your whole life from sitting on a sofa and just with a cell phone, you can get everything you need. You can get food delivered. You can get your groceries done. You can meet a partner. You can date all from your
Yeah.
cell phone. Then it actually is creating isolation and disconnection, when we're supposed to be creating connect, or not we're supposed to be, but what's healthy for us is to create connection. So that's something I'd love to learn more from you about. Like, when you see people who are really struggling, how much is it about just the relationships in their lives? How much are relationships affecting their mental health?
Relationships are everything. If you think about the context, like for my life, Jay, I spent so many years in active addiction. Well, who do we surround ourselves with? Like-minded individuals. And sadly, you get too close to us in our active addiction, we get rid of you if you don't give us what it is that our brain says that we need. And I think that we're also mirrors for each other. And for me, there were just so many people who would challenge me, and I knew that I had a problem. I wanted to stop this lifestyle of destruction. I just didn't know how. And it was just easier for me to get rid of those people because they made me look at myself. And it was easier to surround myself with people who are also trying to destroy themselves in different ways. Uh, and sobriety for me was an entirely different way of life. I was fortunate to work at a treatment center for a couple of years. And for me, that was always the foundation. Let's try to help people first and foremost to go within, to have a relationship with themselves, because I had no relationship with myself. And I therefore could not have any relationships with anyone else. And I think for me, my definition of addiction is like it's very simple. It's a way to live outside of self so that we don't have to be with self. And we can lose ourselves in so many things. To your point, whether it's the phone, it can be work, it can be alcohol, substances. But what's sad, and I'm curious to get your take on this, Jay, but I really believe that very few people have a true and authentic relationship with themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I was telling you before we started recording that last week I was in Aruba and I was working on my book, and I was I was on the beach. I had my laptop out and I was looking up, and I'm looking at the water, and I just felt so connected. I felt connected to all of it. I felt connected to nature. I felt connected to the work I was doing. I just felt deep connection. And it occurred to me, Alan, that when we are struggling, it's in those moments of disconnection, as you alluded to before, where we reach for things. So we're trying to find the connection, right? When you were saying before, let's say it was a substance, whether it's alcohol or drugs, or some people, it's their phones, right? They're reaching for their phones. What are they seeking? They're seeking connection in something, but
Mm.
oftentimes what they're using to try to fill that hole within themselves is very harmful, especially things like, alcohol, drugs, or junk food, or gambling, or in some cases, the phone itself could be a big problem. And I do feel that that's what we're all reaching for. We're all seeking connection. So, what I guess when you were saying relationship to self, how I would see that as is when you are fully connected and you're fully engaged, then you are in that healthy relationship to self, where you're not in a confrontation with yourself. Like you were saying earlier, you hate yourself, or you're mad at yourself, or you're judging yourself. But really, there can't be two of you in there, right? One fighting the other. It's kind of like what we fall into, right? It's this illusion. But when we stop doing that, then we just are ourselves. That's the natural and healthy relationship to self. And then it allows for us to be able to effectively serve others because we're coming from a place of wholeness, WHOLE, place of wholeness rather than a place of lack.
Yeah. The challenge for many and the challenge for me was that as soon as there was silence or I started to attempt to connect to myself, then all the pain started to rise. And, you know, to your point earlier, where as a man, we're taught to just stuff everything in, but emotions are energy and that stuff has to go somewhere. And I hated the night, Jay. I hated the night. I hated silence because that's where everything started to make noise and I hated how I felt. So then I'm quickly going back into old patterns and trying to stuff it all in again because a lot of us have things inside that are very painful and unfortunately, we lack the tools to manage that pain, or there's things like stigma. And so we resort back to those old behaviors. And as we know, a lot of us fear change. Change is uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think that the story from the top of the episode of Nico, he's going through what you just described, where he comes home from work at the end of the day and he's just reaching for something. He watching Netflix, just junk food. Like he doesn't want to sit in silence and hear those thoughts. He doesn't want to face the pain. So when you think about what worked for you, what you know works for others, and what would work for someone like Nico, in those moments, in those dark moments, what would you suggest someone do when they're feeling that sense of overwhelm with all of those thoughts and all of those disruptive emotions?
Nico is me in so many ways. You know, when I first read that story, it was basically a little snippet of my life, and it made me sad because I mean, I moved 12 times in the last 6 years of my addiction. There was no foundation. It was nothing but running. I put on that proverbial mask. It was beyond exhausting. And what I do believe for Nico and for anyone else is that darkness begs to see the light of day. It begs to see the light of day. There's a great line from an elder who I met, and he said, "It's okay, Al, to let the bird in your mind, but do not let it make a nest."
Mm.
Because when we're sitting in silence or when we put our head on the pillow at the end of the long day, often the mind will do what the mind does. And it's telling us all the things that went wrong throughout the day, the conversations that went south, the mistakes that we made. And what I'm saying is, this stuff has to see the light of day. So for Nico, for anyone else, to find some kind of an outlet so that they can be free from the emotions that no longer serve them.
Mm.
And not all of us like to talk. Talking is one way that we can be free from some of those emotions. But Jay, for me, it was pen and paper because you can tell a piece of paper anything. And when you're done, you can rip it up, burn it, bury it, put it in a balloon. It doesn't matter. You get rid of it.
Yeah.
But I had to start finding creative ways to make sure that I was getting rid of some of this stuff. Like trust. I still don't trust people. I'm working on it. But to find maybe a professional, maybe a friend, maybe a family member. I was talking to someone this morning who actually uses AI to talk about their challenges with mental health because they struggle with trust. But the point is, this stuff has to come out in a healthy way.
So you named a few different ways. You said it could be through talking with family, it could be through talking with a professional or a counselor. And then you mentioned just writing it out, pen and paper, and just getting it out there. But essentially, really, it's just being able to release that which has been suppressed and boiling up within an individual. And when you think about, okay, there's that way of, or there's the outlet, are there other things that you found to be helpful that have to do with more related to how someone takes care of themselves?
That was hard. And it's weird because I studied kinesiology for a couple years, then I got a degree in phys ed, which is all about taking care of yourself. And then I was an educator and I'm teaching courses on wellness. Plus, I'm a motivational speaker at the time, but I'm actually still destroying myself. And it was such um, a battle because my mind always said, why would I want to take care of this? Because then that just means I have to stick around longer. And for me, Jay, suicide has been something that I have struggled with my entire life. And I have flirted with that so many times. And uh, the this is a sad truth, but I lost my best friend, Justin Andres, to suicide. And we had parallel lives. And the sad reality is that through his death, I was able to find life. Um, because I learned that it's not the answer. And that actually was one of the catalysts for me that helped me to understand, like, I got to do a better job of managing some of this pain. My go-to emotion, like many others, is anger. But thanks to a lot of professionals, I was able to understand that anger is often a secondary emotion. And you know what fueled it for me was actually sadness.
Mm.
I was sad, but go back to those old scripts. As a man, I was taught that it wasn't okay to be sad. And we also understand that hurt people hurt people. And I simply projected the pain. And then I got tired of hurting people and I got tired of hurting myself. And so I started to lean on others and lean on community. So fortunate to find a woman who believed in me more than I believed in myself. That, like, Jay, if there is a game changer for me, I met a woman named Tanny who's now my wife, but she had two boys. And I I was still struggling with alcoholism when I first met her kids. And it's a special day when a single mom says, you can meet my kids.
Yeah.
And what I remember the most is, like, these three people loved me for me. And I didn't have to wear some kind of a mask. And they actually made me a birthday cake. The first time I met Tanya's kids, it was on my birthday. And man, that was a lot more than a cake. For me, it was like, this is possible. Like, maybe I could actually have a family and have support. And it was the first time where I actually wanted to take care of myself because, just before that, I was given a month to live from a doctor due to my destructive lifestyle. And um, it was only through uh, being shown love and being accepted for who I was that I was able to start to turn that corner.
Mm.
And I understood that I had to start giving myself permission to be vulnerable so that I could ultimately get the rewards. Because when I look back, there's three things that I wanted. I wanted to be seen, I wanted to be heard, I wanted to be supported. You do not get those three things if you don't give yourself permission to be vulnerable.
I appreciate you sharing that. It's I guess it's at the core of what makes life worth living, isn't it? I
Mm,
mean, when you think about what are the best moments in life, what are what's the good stuff? When you're at the very end and you're looking back and you're going to be like, that was a highlight for me. Isn't it
mm,
always going to be a time when you were seen, you were heard, you were supported, as well as you were vulnerable, therefore you were fully connected to the people around you or your environment?
mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for. And it's like optimizing that, cultivating more of that. And it isn't to suggest that the dark stuff doesn't come up either, because the dark stuff's going to come up. And when someone like Nico, who he has to do the work, of course, right? He has to do the work himself. Everyone has to do the work. what would be something that you would think would help him to be able to, let's say, interrupt that pattern? Let's say he's in it, he's like, all right, I want to start this work. I'm making that
Mm.
commitment. Now, what would be something that you'd want to give him? Like, okay, when this does come up for you, here's how I want you to handle it.
Yeah. I can't tell you, Jay, how many times I've written letters to myself saying I'm done with this destructive lifestyle. And I tried so many times. And in my case, I think that's often part of the recovery process. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I would say it was about a mindset more than anything. Uh, there was a man who I respect. He says to me, "Oh, you are not the only person who struggled with mental illness. You are not the only person who struggled with addiction. And Al, you're not the only person who's been sexually abused." He said, "If you want something different, go get it because this world owes you nothing."
Hmm.
And
Tough
I was
love.
pretty mad. I was really mad. And then I go home and I'm chewing on this. And I mean, is there truth in a statement like that? Yes or no?
I think how it was communicated was a little blunt, but yeah, I'd say there's truth to it.
Yeah, like he could have said it nicer, but
Right.
the reality is, had he said it nicer, I bet you I would not have heard. And I was the guy who had the V on my forehead for so long. It was like, oh, woe is me. You wouldn't understand. And that did not serve me at all. So I had to start changing the mindset. It was like, oh, I tried seeing a couple counselors. They never understood me. Well, was I actually being honest? Was I giving it a fair shot? No, I was still on a smorgasbord of pharmaceutical pills from psychiatrists, but I was still an alcoholic with the victim mentality. So, of course, that's not a great recipe for healing. And I just started to make these small incremental changes because in my journey to just stop a life of destruction was so unrealistic. Like that's all I'd known. So to just be healthy, like what does that even mean? For someone like Nico, for anyone who's in that state, I think it's just those small achievable goals and embracing that sometimes we have to do things afraid. I have no words to explain the fear, the shame, the anxiety that I had before I went to my first Gamblers Anonymous meeting, before I went to my first Alcoholics meeting, to join bipolar support groups, to walk into the Saskatoon Sexual Assault Center for other men who've been sexually abused. No words. But I also have no words to explain the liberation that came from simply being understood. And so I would encourage someone like Nico or anyone who's sick and tired of being sick and tired to try taking a risk. And I suspect you'll be pleasantly surprised.
And I think the word risk is the right word because it's going to feel risky. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It takes a lot of courage to do so. And you also brought up something that I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about when you said you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. The person of whom I'm referring to in this story, Nico, is of course a real person where I changed some of the details. And I remember that this person would always feel like they were behind, meaning, oh, I'm trying, but I'm not making enough progress. And what I think is a common thing, Alan, is that people have these expectations of, well, I need to either be 100% great, better, and never having the problem, or I'm in my stuff and I'm still stuck, right? It's like binary in our minds. Either we're fixed or we're broken. But the way you describe that is completely different. So I guess what's the expectation that you would encourage someone like Nico or anyone else who's in a place like this of what it's going to be like for them to get out of it?
I find it interesting, Jay, that there's a lot of talk about kindness, which is fair. We got to be kind to others, but we got to be kind to ourselves. And I don't know about you, but I used to talk to myself in ways that I would never talk to anyone else. Do you ever do that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I think for me, more than anything, it was paying attention to the way that I speak to myself and having realistic expectations. We compare ourselves to people way too often. And I mean, I did that in every single thing. I sought my value through others, similar to the example you gave with Nico, that self validation. It has to come from outside of self. I think it was Yogi who said, if you don't go within, you go without. And just to pull another line, early in my recovery, I had an elder who said, when you visit some of those dark caverns, make sure that you take a friend and a flashlight. And that's what I had to start doing. I had to start giving myself permission to go within, to look at some of this stuff, to stop with the BS, to start being honest, and to start thinking about what it is that I wanted from life. Because I had to play that tape forward. I actually printed a picture of that proverbial fork in the road and I put it on my office wall so that every decision I made, I was able to play that tape forward, figuring out whether or not that was the outcome that I wanted. And I had a healthy person, a partner, now my wife, who did not tolerate certain behaviors, which was my saving grace, because she made it very clear when I moved in, only 3 months sober, that if I resort to any of those old behaviors, then this is gone. Because she worked too hard to create that life, and I needed that. So I it sounds so ridiculous, but it's true, Jay, that I I didn't know what boundaries were. I didn't know what healthy was. I never had a healthy relationship before, and so I had to start relying on others, and it was embarrassing in so many ways. But I understood that I was responsible for my own happiness. That's it.
Hmm. I think the common tendency of every person is, well, not every person, but most people, is to seek it out through external validation, like you were saying. And I think Nico's doing that in this story. I am responsible for my own happiness is, I think, at the core of what all of us need to adopt to get out of this social comparison, this constant self judgment, or this I'm not good enough when I compare me to these other people. What is, so you said, the tape plays, when that tape plays of comparison, what's the way that you found was helpful for you to be able to work through it? Because you said this is something that you've dealt with, me too. How do you work through the comparison when it comes up for you now?
I'm so grateful again to have a partner who is that sounding board. When I tried to fight things on my own, I couldn't, because then I was stuck in my own mind, which wasn't a healthy place. And well, do you remember he's a Canadian astronaut, plays guitar. I'm drawing blank on his name, but I was doing an event and he was speaking before me, and then he was doing his book signing. I had my book signing after him. And I was like, well, who the hell would want to, me to sign that book? And then even the host says, do you want me to tell him to, that you're up now? Because there's still this long line. And I'm like, yeah, again, I'm drawing blank on the name, but so that's an example where I remember I called Tanya, my wife, and it's like, you are the $1 billion diamond in the rough. There is nobody that is just like you. You are perfect to yourself. The greatest flaw that I made in this world was trying to be something that I was not, and it was exhausting. And the more that I started to just understand that I'm going to be me, I'm done with the mask, then you'll naturally attract like-minded individuals who have that same energy, who are, we often talk about finding our tribe. You don't find that by being something that you are not. And so you simply, it's like, whether it's a podcast, whether it's writing a book, standing on a stage, being a leader, nobody will do it how you do it, because you are you. And it's taken a long time, Jay, and I'm still not there. but I have glimpses of it. And I am still learning how to stay alive, if I'm being honest. I'm still learning how to take care of myself um, in a healthy way.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like one of the big things that have helped you that I think people listening can really take away from this conversation is how important your support system is, and the people that you have surrounding you and the people who are cheering you on. It's critical. I'd say it's critical. It's a non-negotiable part of what will allow for you to live a happy, fulfilling, rewarding life. So, Allan, if I were to ask you to consider this scenario, let's assume you were giving a keynote for a conference and Nico was attending. He was there in the audience. And after a keynote, you come off stage, you're speaking with some of the attendees, and Nico approaches you and he tells you his story. He tells you everything he's working through right now. And you listen with compassion, and you have an opportunity to ask him a question or two to get him to have a shift in mindset or maybe see things a bit differently. What would you ask Nico?
I was not in a good space, and I had this roommate who I didn't even know that he was in recovery, but he would always listen. And this is when I was like everything was falling apart physically, mentally. I dropped out of university, and the one night, he just listened. Like, I mean, really listened, not with the intention of responding. And then he said, "Are you tired?" And I just broke. And he said, "You don't have to do this alone." And at that point, he started to share some of the things that he had gone through. And just through that, I understood that he got me. And I think that my hope would be with Nico, I don't dive into my story too much from a stage, but it's enough so that I can let myself credible. And it would just be that reassurance that, this way of life doesn't have to be forever. You do have a choice, and there are people out there who can understand you. I don't go to a 12-step meeting to work the program as much as I go to be understood. It's everything.
That's a powerful story of you and your roommate. Just how listening goes such a long way, to have someone that is listening just to understand, not to judge you, not because they want to sound smart in how they respond. And I agree with you. I think that is what Nico needs the most, is to have somebody who can help him feel seen and heard and supported, as you said earlier. And for anyone listening, I really recommend looking up Allan and the great work he's doing. You can go to allankehler.com. That's ALLANKEHLER.com. And I know that you're active on LinkedIn, Allan. That's how you and I connected. And so anyone can find Allan's content via LinkedIn. Just look him up. He's there. Allan, I am so grateful that we connected. We made this happen. This was a powerful conversation, and I want to thank you for taking time today to chat with me.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate you.
I'm so grateful to Allan for being so vulnerable, so real, having the courage to tell his story. I feel like so often you don't hear people speak as raw and honestly as Allan did in this conversation. So I really appreciate him for that. And I'll do my best to bring it down to our insights and our actionable takeaways. We always have 3 insights, 3 takeaways. Here they are. First insight: vulnerability breeds vulnerability. When you're able to use those 2 words with someone else that he talked about, 2 of the most powerful words you can use, me too, you're communicating that someone else is not alone. And there's power in your story, and vulnerability is a strength. So don't see it as a weakness. And you're also allowing others, or inviting others, giving them permission to share their story when you share yours. The second insight: connection is everything. life is all about relationships. It's relationships to others, to self, to your environment. There's such value in that connection. So recognizing that that's something you need to reestablish day in and day out. The third insight, darkness begs to see the light of day. Just because someone is smiling doesn't necessarily mean that they're okay. There could be something that they're hiding, and if you yourself are the one who's suppressing it, you need to find a healthy way to channel it. And I think that leads us to our first actionable takeaway, which is take small steps to being vulnerable. You don't need to get on a stage and share your story the way Allan does. It could be small. Maybe changing how you answer a simple question like, how are you? Because one way to think about it is if you just say you're good, you might be thinking, oh, I don't want to burden that person. But in reality, you're also not being honest. You're not being authentic. In a way, you're being fake, aren't you? Because you're not expressing what you're really going through. Now, you don't need to vent to the person, but you can honestly share what you're going through. And just that minor step will open you up to share more. Second actionable takeaway, talk it out or write it out. You can express how you're feeling with another person, or you can write this out as the way he did, journal it, pen to paper, as needed to express whatever's coming up for you. And as he quoted, it's important to remember, if you don't go within, you go without. And the third actionable takeaway, what I hope you're taking away from our conversation, is when you visit those dark taverns, go in with a friend and a flashlight. I think that's powerful imagery to not attempt to do everything alone. You're not supposed to fight all these battles alone. There are people around you that care about you, that want to help. And I think that that's what I'm going to be focusing on Friday's episode. I'm going to dive into the difference between venting, complaining, playing the victim, being in a victim mindset, and a healthy expression of a challenge, of disruptive emotions. I think too often people fall into that concern of, oh, I don't want to burden other people. They have their own stuff going on. I don't want to bother them. When in reality, people want to help. So how do you have those conversations? What does it look like to express those emotions in a healthy way without falling into a victim mindset? So until next time, thank you so much for listening.